always try to make sure,
My
like,
friends
my
that
friends
didn't
that didn't
choose the streets,
the
the ones that we consider
like, I always try to make sure I tell them how proud of them I am.
because they the
Because
strong
they the
ones, they the
strong ones,
tough
they the
guys,
tough guys.
they the ones who
They the
didn't
ones who
break.
didn't break. Most of us broke early in life, man. We fell to the pressure, we fell to the temptation. And they came outside the same hood and walked past the same temptation, all the shit that's going on, the peer pressure, and they stayed focused. They stayed focused. They ain't let that shit break them. All the girls calling them lames, not wanting to give them no pussy because they considered to be a square and corny and all that shit, and they still stayed on course. They didn't break. Then you...
All right, welcome back to another episode of Streams. I think this is episode 32. This time I'm going to take it upon myself to actually talk about the topic that I intended to talk about in the last episode. I kind of got carried away talking about what I started the video off with and never got to that topic. But my intended topic for last week was, so how do I present this? I was out somewhere, and I was just people watching and observing, like as I normally do, right? And I was just paying attention to people and their tics, their quirks, their habits, their mannerisms, all that, right? And I say this with all possible humility and respect, but I was kind of thrown back. I was kind of taken aback by what I was seeing in people. And I was questioning myself as to why, how do people become this way, where I was? Man, let's just be real, man. I was in the motherfucking hood, all right? I was in the hood, and I was with some people that was ghettoed in a motherfucker. That's what I'm trying to say, right? These motherfuckers was hood. I don't know how else to say it, right? And you can see it, and it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Their habits and the things that their diet, whether it's mentally or literally, all these sorts of things. And it shows itself on people's skin, their demeanor, the way that they relate to others, treat others, and talk to people, the language that they use, the types of foods and shit that they drink, the way that they dress even. And I was just thinking about this shit. And I brought it up to my homeboy. And I think he had bounced the idea off of me, like, man, that stuff happens because people are born into these environments and they're consumed by them. I don't know if he said it or I said it. It's a conversation that's a couple weeks old now. But I got to thinking about that, right? And the question came up like, why wasn't I consumed by it? Because it's not like I don't come from the same exact environment as these people that I'm talking about and the people that I'm not talking about. I come from the same environments. I never lived in the suburbs before. I certainly didn't grow up in them. I certainly didn't go to school in them, you know. A lot of my friends got shot and killed or went to prison and did a bid, or a lot of things, you know, happened to my peers. What I'm trying to say is that I was adjacent to these things all my life now. You know, there's never been a point in my life where I wasn't exposed to this type of shit, man. So the question is, after we had that conversation, I brought it up to another homeboy. He essentially said the same thing. It consumes you. And if you don't get out of it, or if you don't see something beyond it, you will become it, right? And I'm not saying this, I'm You know, I'm trying to be less tiptoey in these videos, but I can't help but to be who I am. I want to make it clear. I'm not trying to disrespect any cultures, any people. You know, and of course, that's not for me some sort of fear of me being canceled or something, because first of all, who am I? And secondly, fuck you. But I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm not even trying to be judgmental. I was simply observing something, and it was something that I did observe with my own eyes, right? And this is a phenomenon. You know, you could tell the difference when you meet somebody from the hood versus when you meet somebody of the hood. Like, you eat, sleep, shit, breathe this shit, you know, as opposed to somebody who's in it and they might have a different outlook. They might have a different perspective. I don't know why. What is that? That's essentially what I'm trying to make this video about. What is that? My homeboys had a few things to say. One of my homeboys said that it's probably dictated by a person's the things that they're exposed to. Even if you come from the hood, you might be exposed to people or things, whether it's in school or in your personal life, everyday interactions with your people or just random people, where you might learn to view things outside of your immediate circumstances. And it's a shame to me that some people are capable of doing that where other people are not. And the people that are not fall victim to the very traps that we see people fall victim to time and time again, generation after generation. Whether it's addiction, becoming addicted to cigarettes, blunts, weed, alcohol, you know. And it's all fun and games until a motherfucker is dying of, you know, kidney failure or some shit like that, or liver disease or something, you know what I'm saying? Or some sort of heart problem that I watched many of my relatives and loved ones die from all my life now. You know, it's all fun and games. It's all just a party. But these things that I'm talking about, it's not some small thing. These are diseases, you know, and like I said, they manifest themselves in plenty of different ways. One of which is you could look at a motherfucker's skin and you could tell, you know, 9 times out of 10, what they've been through, what type of care they give themselves, and how rough they've had it. Damn near. You can look at a person's face. Shit, you can look at the way a person's skin in their face and the way it looks and the way it darkens in certain areas, that it tells a story about people, you know. And it's not 100% foolproof. But look, man, I'm trying to say this shit without being just totally like I'm dogging people. I'm not trying to do that. But this is something that I've noticed all my life, man. Like, you will meet somebody, you will see a girl that's just absolutely beautiful, right? Just bad as hell. But then you will look at her or you will talk to her and you will get this attitude or this demeanor, this the way that she presents herself is like, it's like you don't act as pretty as you look. Like, you're mean as fuck. It's like, imagine seeing a girl, she's just beautiful, right? And then she turn around and she's just got this look on her face like she ready to fight or like she's just fucking tired, right? Just look mean as shit. Then she open her mouth and she sounds just like a nigga. It's like, yeah, I know where you come from. I know what you done been through. You've been in these motherfucking trenches. And these motherfuckers is eating you alive. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a thing. I don't give a fuck what nobody say. And it just, you know, it amazes me. Like, how does that happen to one person who lives right next door to another person that it doesn't happen to? And like I was saying, my homeboys were saying, like, you know, it depends on what a person is exposed to. And it's not like he's teaching me this, but I was just looking for other people's perspective or reasoning behind this thing. And he said, you know, some people, they desire more. Some people grow up and they see the world differently than they used to. Some people don't. Some people are exposed to better and they imitate that or they aspire to achieve that. Me and my sister was on the phone earlier today for probably like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we were talking about our mother. And I was telling her my experience with my mother versus her experience with my mother. I was telling her when I was real little, I remember her being a totally different person. A person that my sister never got a chance to see because we were born 7.5 years apart, almost to the day. Right? I was explaining that I remember my mother being a little more rough around the edges. I remember her cursing a little more frequently when I was little because now she doesn't really curse at all. I won't say it's because of her religion because it precedes that. I mean, it might just be maturity. But I did notice a change in my life, in my lifetime, and the way that she related to me as my mother and the way that she took care of me and all of those things, they changed over time. And I'm not talking about later in my life. I'm talking about, like, I remember her being a certain way when I was 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years old. And then I remember shortly thereafter, she was like a totally different person in the best way that I mean that in the best way. She changed for the better. Her language changed. The way that she spoke changed. She grew up and she became a woman. The way that she talked to me and people in general changed. She spoke a lot more softly. She became more loving. She was much more patient with me. I was telling my sister, so we grew up in a household where my father was authoritarian, and that's what I believe in anyway. I believe, maybe that's why, but based on my experience as a man in this life, I believe the father should be the authoritarian, whatever works for any given family, but that's what I personally believe in. But I remember a time, or I was going to say, we grew up in a household where, first of all, we rarely ever got whoopings, but it certainly never came from our mother, right? And my sister knows this because she's never gotten a whipping, especially not from my mother. She probably got popped on the ass or the hand or something by my dad, or maybe even my mom once or twice in a very subtle, small way, but never got her ass whooped. Never no belts. We ain't getting no switches off the tree. Our parents wasn't on that. My sister never got a whooping. I was telling her this story of when I was maybe 4 or even younger. I don't know how old I was because I was so young. I wasn't even conscious of an age. I was so young though. And I remember my mother told me to do something, or she got mad at me and told me to go in my room. And I remember going in my room and I started like slamming my toys and playing with my toys in a very loud, obnoxious way because I was trying to be passive aggressive without even understanding the concept, which is crazy. Trying to be passive aggressive and be an asshole to my mother, who was in the next room watching TV or something. And she got up and she came in the room and she whooped my ass. I remember another time her chasing me, like she came to whoop my ass, but I run up the hallway. I'm little as hell. I know how little this house is now, but at the time, this run from one end of the hallway to the other seemed like forever. Because that's how I know I had to be little. And I remember running from her out of my room, up the hallway into the living room, and she chased me and cornered me and whooped my ass real quick. like just popped me on the ass a few times. And she went back to her room, and I remember crying, right? And I remember I'm telling my sister this, and she's like, kind of like, wow, because I ain't never went through that. I never got whooped. And I'm like, yeah, and I didn't either after that. I think my mother only whooped me twice, maybe, that I can remember, and then never, ever again. And her whole aura changed, you know, and I watched it happen to my father too, but in a much more subtle way, because my father still kept his edge because he's a man. And, you know, they walk two different paths. But my mother, who I wouldn't say she was masculine, but she was a lot more rough around the edges. She was a lot more impatient. She was a little more scary. She cursed more. And then I watched all of that dissolve away and then never to return. Because if you talk to my mother today, anybody that knows my mother, yeah, she could be a little snappy, but I don't think I can count on 5 fingers the amount of times that I've seen her yell at somebody. You know, I've seen it, but it was very far and few between that I saw it. She was much more patient. She spoke softly. She learned how to diffuse things or to destroy people with her vocabulary, and with her mind. And this is something that I observed all my life and I learned. But I also had a father who had that fire in him, and I learned that side too. So I could do both. But the question, the topic at hand is, why did she change? How did she change? And then the 1B question, that was 1A. 1B would be, why do other people not change? Why do other people not see better for themselves? Why do other people not rise above their circumstances while their neighbor can? And if I'm speaking for myself, you know, it's ironic that this topic is what was on my mind today, because right before I started this video, I opened up Instagram and this video popped up of this guy talking about, he said he makes sure, he tries his best to make sure all of his friends that didn't choose the streets, he tells them that he appreciates and loves them for the path that they chose. He was like, our square friends were the strong niggas. They was the real niggas all along. This is not my narrative. This is what he said. He said, our square friends was the real niggas all along. They didn't choose the streets. They was getting looked over by niggas and looked at as lames. They was getting told by the girls that they was lame. They wasn't getting pussy thrown at them because they was lame. They didn't have the cars. They didn't dress a certain way. They didn't, you know, attend the parties or the functions or whatever with these niggas. They didn't behave or act a certain way. So they were looked at and deemed to be lame. Man, that shit is me, my nigga. That's my life. That's who I am from the very beginning. I remember being in school and questioning why certain niggas didn't like me and really being bothered by it a lot, you know, as opposed to now when I'm an adult, where, first of all, that type of shit doesn't matter as much because we ain't in school fighting for social status anyway. But social status is still a thing, you know, whether you like it or not, if you live in a society. Now, you might be the type of person that's strong enough to not give a fuck and ignore that aspect of life altogether. And that's what I recommend, actually. But, you know, just to be honest, it does matter to all of us, or a lot of us, sometimes. I remember being in school wondering why certain niggas, I just didn't click with them. I don't know why this nigga, he looking at me like this. And it still happens to this day. I'll be in the studio and it might be niggas that I look up to, niggas that's older than me, or niggas that's been doing music for a long time, and I'll be in the studio with them. And I could just tell, like, yeah, this nigga don't really feel me. Like, I ain't gonna say he don't like me, because niggas show me respect, but I could just tell, like, there's no connection here. And that's fine, you know, it's whatever. but I notice it is all I'm saying, right? And I've wondered why all of my life. Less now, but more so when I was younger. I wonder why all my life. Why is that a thing for me? Why is that my relationship to people? And the answer really is because I just don't relate to this shit in a lot of ways. I can relate to niggas in basic ways and in very, fundamental ways. But when it comes to like getting to that next level with people liking me, being friends with a motherfucker or relating and making connections with people, I've never been good at that. And I noticed that very early on in my life, right? And I think the thing is, one of the reasons for this is that, nigga, I am a square dog. I'm not into the shit that niggas is into. I don't smoke, I don't drink. I'm not into the shit that y'all into. I really don't want to hang out for real. I like talking about things that niggas don't give a fuck about. I like talking about art, nigga. I like arguing about music because it's art. I like talking about philosophy. I like talking about conspiracy theories. I like watching documentaries and then discussing the contents of it. I like talking about shit like I like talking about shit like how mushrooms connect every living being in the world. You think a nigga, when I've been to clubs and strip clubs or wherever, these settings where things are much more lackadaisical, niggas want to talk about that? Niggas don't want to talk about that shit. Sometimes they do, but certain environments dictate a nigga don't want to talk about no shit like that. But I've also found niggas don't want to talk about that shit ever. And that's my problem. Because that's where my mind is always at. Now, sometimes I might turn into a fan, a freaky ass nigga, and I might want to talk about sex. I might, I want to talk about some freaky shit. That's something that I can relate to people with, mostly women, obviously. But that's something that's not so up there in terms of like, what the fuck are you talking about? But a nigga can understand talk about like, damn, her booty fat as hell. I could connect with niggas on that. I like cars. I could talk to niggas about that. As of the last 7-8 years of my life, I got into basketball a lot more. Definitely can relate to niggas about that, right? But it's not a lot of things that my mind has cycling through it on a day-to-day basis that niggas really are willing to stop and talk to me about in the settings that we be in. So I don't know how to connect to people. I don't party. I don't run in the circles y'all run in. I ain't into jewelry. I've got a little watch on my hand, but I ain't into the type of shit niggas is into, man. And, because of those things, I've been labeled the square, a lame, whatever you want to call it, all my motherfucking life. So, with that being said, I remember feeling like that in school, like niggas be looking at me like who is this nigga? Like, you know what I'm saying? And me having to kind of just be like, well, all right. I just got to take that on the chin and be by myself. I say that to say, I've always seen things beyond the things that it seems like other people see. That's not to say that I'm better than anybody, because I ain't. I'm still in the hood. I have not gone anywhere. I'm on Joy Road right now. I'm on Joy Road right now. So it's not like, I'm not trying to say I'm better than anybody, because we still in the same place. But the things that are immediately important to me typically don't align to the things that are immediately important to other people a lot of times. Let me try to keep my thoughts as organized as I can. So I say that to say that is one of the major things that has contributed to me being able to rise above these traps and these circumstances that other people find themselves in. Man, I proudly say, and I probably say, I've never had a pair of handcuffs on me, ever. You know, and, you know, you could talk to niggas that know me. It ain't because I'm a coward. It's just because I don't be involved in that shit. It ain't because I'm squeaky clean, because I done some shit. You know, but I'm saying the people that find themselves being pulled into these traps, being ensnared by the same shit over and over again, typically frequent the same types of people, types of places over and over again. I don't like being in the hood, but I am in the hood. So when I am in the hood, I'm in the house, or I'm to myself, or I'm with people that are trustworthy, people that trust me, because I know they ain't gonna be on no bullshit. But then flip the page, and I'm in rooms with niggas talking to them about being caught up, getting put in the back of police cars because they was with a nigga who was on total bullshit. Or being with niggas that didn't have their best interest at heart. So they would do shit to get everybody in trouble. Like a nigga told me he was chilling in the house and the fucking door gets kicked in, and then the police find all kind of shit in the house, and now this nigga gotta go to jail and he can't snitch. So he just gotta take that shit and live with it. Man, I don't want to do that. I'm not saying I would tell on a nigga, because I understand the code and I'm from this shit just like you from this shit. But what I'm saying is I don't expose myself to that shit because I don't want to fucking go to jail for none of these niggas. You know? Now, if it's a motherfucker I love, yeah, you know, I do whatever I gotta do, you know. But I would never make a nigga take no fucking bid for me anyway. And the niggas that I be with wouldn't do that shit to me either. You know? Barring just the worst circumstances you can imagine, but I wouldn't do that shit to somebody, and these niggas wouldn't do that shit to me. But that's why I be with the niggas that I be with. I'm with niggas, though I'm trying to tell you, like, I want you to understand very fucking clearly. I'm not saying that I'm with a bunch of goody two-shoes, because one of my best friends is a street nigga, bro. You know, plenty of my best friends, plenty of niggas that I love are street niggas. They're drug dealers. They're, you know, niggas do. I know niggas into all kind of shit. So don't get that in your mind. But, you know, you don't understand. You won't understand it unless you understand it. You know what I'm saying? A nigga, I don't know. Let me get back on track. So I noticed at an early age that I just saw shit differently than my peers. The shit that they thought was important, I didn't. And I attribute 85, 90% of that to my father. Because he was just drilling these principles into my head. As early as I could understand the English language, he would just talk and talk and talk. And he even told me himself, like, you used to fall asleep while I'm talking. And he would ask me, like, you tired of me talking? And I might be like, nah. And I remember saying that, like, no, I ain't, like, no, I'm listening. But I'm really am tired of you talking, right? But now that I'm older, fighting tears right now. I know this is something I'm going to think of for the rest of my natural life. Even when my father may be gone, that I appreciate that shit so much now that I'm grown, because he drilled these things into my head. Like, these things don't matter. The shit that everybody else is clamoring to get don't even fucking matter. So I'm 7 years old walking around with this understanding, not knowing what to do with it, but I think that is the thing that separated me and ultimately alienated me from my peers. But in retrospect, I don't even give a fuck, because it put me where I am today. It gave me the resolve and the understanding that I have today. It gave me the ability to prioritize that I have today. Because I know niggas, you know, whether it be at a distance or not, I know niggas that can't stop going to jail. I know niggas that can't stop fucking with stupid, goofy ass bitches. I know niggas that can't stop getting random hoes pregnant. I know niggas that can't stop blowing all their money on superficial shit that doesn't mean anything and contributes nothing to your everyday life. I know niggas like that suffer from all of those things. I know niggas that caught bodies because they cannot think inside of their head enough to calm themselves down and think rationally about the situation at hand. Like, yeah, I want to bust this nigga's head, but is it really worth it right now? That shit takes maturity. It takes the ability to think. It takes the need and it takes the want to do better. You know what I'm saying? And every nigga don't got that. So I've been placed, I've been blessed with this position of understanding I've been given this ability to perceive. I've been given this perspective that kept me out of a lot of shit, man. So I would imagine the same would be for my mother. I would imagine that she was living a life that she didn't really like, because a lot of us do that, especially when you're too young to even understand what the fuck is going on. When you 22, 21, my mama had me at 22. She had me at 21 technically. And then a month later, she turned 22. At that age, imagine living 22 years up to that point without ever being properly cared for or loved by the people that should have done that for you, right? And then being thrust into adulthood, and then you meet a man, and then you're in love, and then you're in this relationship, and now you're like faced with all of these things that you don't have the tools to deal with, right? And then imagine getting pregnant and then having a baby at 22 when you don't have none of the things that you need. But for some reason, you're able to see beyond that and then aspire for more. How did my mother do that? Because out of the same, I don't mean no disrespect to my family, but out of the same household, my mother rose above some of the shit that even her own brothers and sisters didn't. Why is that? The same for my father, which is even worse if we were to compare their lives, because I know a lot about my mother's story, even though there's some blanks that I need filled in. But I sat down and interviewed my father for probably 8 hours, 10 hours. And then he's talked to me day in and day out my whole life and told me all these things. And he's a very transparent person for the sake of teaching me better, right? This happened to me, that happened to me. I fell victim to this. I did this. I wanted to do that. And I don't want you to do none of that shit. I don't want none of that to happen to you, right? So I know damn near his whole story. How the fuck is my father not doing a life bid right now? I got an uncle named Michael, brilliant motherfucker, man. This dude is smart as shit, all things considered. And he just got out of jail 2-3 years ago after being in that motherfucker for 15, 20 years, something like that. I got another uncle named Keith. Same thing. Got wrapped up in some shit, went to jail. I got another uncle. I got some cousins from either side of the family, went to jail, getting wrapped up in shit. So the question is, these are my father's brothers, though. They all did this, that, and the third. They got caught. My father has done some dirt, but he never got so deep into that shit that I never lost my father to a prison. I never lost my father to anything. My father was there every day of my life. Even now, I just was on the phone with him for about 2-3 hours, just about 48 hours ago. So the question is, even though my father was rubbing elbows with that life, or even dipping his motherfucking big toe in that shit. How the fuck did he rise above that? And now he's doing well for himself, and he has been for a long time. He always saw things differently. He always understood better than the average motherfucker. Even in his street career, he was able to finesse and finagle in ways that other niggas could not. How? And it brings me back to myself. The reason for this video was, one, I wanted to show appreciation, but two, I wanted to just ask, how in the fuck was I able to be born to two parents that have the same perspective? That have the same, I won't say the same perspective, but the same resolve, the same rise above. How the fuck was I lucky enough? And the word is lucky if it ain't blessed. How the fuck was I able to get that? And that's why I can't be judgmental to my peers, because I ain't from my father's generation, but I am from my own, right? I can understand why a motherfucker born into a household, with a single parent or even two parents of two ignorant motherfuckers that don't have that same resolve or rise above that my parents had. So now you're being raised by a motherfucker who did fall victim to everything. The chances of you falling victim to it and never rising above it is exponentially higher. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm saying I'm not trying to be judgmental, because I understand that. It's a phenomenon. It's a factor. It's a truth. It's something that you can't even escape because you don't choose your parents. And while it isn't guaranteed that you'll fail or become some sort of certain way just because you were born into a household, it absolutely makes it more probable. You know what I'm saying? And then what I find upon further investigation, when I do click with people, I usually find out that I click with people that were born into fucked up households and they rose above. And I meet them, I don't want to, this is the only way I can project this, this figure of speech or this metaphor. But, if this is the crowd down here, this is the crowd, I always meet them up here. I'm not trying to say I'm above these people. Or let's just say, okay, let's do it laterally. Here's the crowd, and I'm outcasted from this motherfucker, right? I'm standing over here by myself. And I always end up bumping into another motherfucker in this outcast group. And we just stragglers outside the crowd. And we over here walking around with our hands in our pockets, kicking rocks and shit. And then we bump into each other like, oh, what up? It's like, yeah, what up? And a nigga like, shit, what you on? I remember, dog, life is a funny thing, bro. I'm going to end this episode soon, but I just wanted to point this out. One of my longest friendships, one of my oldest friends in life is my nigga Joseph, man. I love this nigga, dog. And I almost appreciate him more as adults, even though we don't even talk very often. I appreciate him more now than I did then, right? This nigga, I don't know why. It's like, man, God is real, dog. That's all I can say. I remember sitting in my lunchroom in my elementary school. I don't even think I was eating. I think I was just sitting there probably talking to my classmates on some bullshit. This nigga, I think he was at the table for somebody else because I think he knew a nigga in my class. He comes to the table and he's like, he just, just being a kid talking to another nigga in my class. And this nigga just chooses me, right? He just starts talking to me. I don't remember what the conversation was because this was, This was motherfucking 27 years ago, 26, 28 years ago. I don't remember the exact conversation. But I remember him talking to me like, it was strange because he had this like way of talking to me like he cared about me. Like, I don't know how else to explain it other than that. He was talking to me like he cared about me. Like, he was talking to me like I was a human being, as opposed to the other kids. They were just kids, and they were niggas. They were hood kids, so they don't give a fuck about nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you go into school and you go into a hood school, man, these kids are just playful. They'll crack on your ass before they'll talk to you like they care about you. For some reason, this nigga, he not even in my class. He's not even supposed to be sitting at my lunch table, but he's sitting over here and he just chooses me and he starts talking to me. And I think he asked me like, what school did I come from? What's my name? And he saw me because I remember this was my first year at this school too, like very early into the school year. And I remember feeling invisible in that motherfucker because I didn't know nobody. Nobody gave a shit about getting to know me. I'm quiet, I'm shy. I'm very self-conscious and insecure with myself as a little 8-year-old boy or whatever, little 7-year-old boy. I remember feeling invisible in this bitch. And I remember being in lunch, those types of times in school, because at lunch, everybody talking. One friend sits next to the other friend because they eating together. All the girls clicked up. And I'm just in the middle of this shit. I don't know nobody. And it makes the fact that I don't know nobody much more obvious. You know what I'm saying? Like, because everybody's clicked up at lunch. And I'm just sitting there kind of like, just waiting for the fucking bell to ring. And this nigga just chose me, bro. And that's how, in getting to know him throughout that school year and the next 5 school years, and then after graduating, we went to different high schools, but we stayed in contact with each other till today. You know what I'm saying? And it's like connections like that with people that are very similar to me is how it's happened all my life. They usually find me. And then upon further investigation, getting to know each other better, you find out that this motherfucker is just like me. Or even if our backgrounds aren't mirrored, they're not mirrored, they aren't exactly the same, they're very similar in principles. They're very similar in values. Shit that happened to him may have happened to me in a different way, but they had the same results in us. And I always meet these people being a straggler from the main group, even though Joe was a nigga that could straddle the fence between either group because people like him. They like him. And this is the same exact shit that I was just explaining to my sister on the phone just 2-3 hours ago. I was telling her, people like you, but people don't necessarily like me the way that they like you, for whatever that reason might be. But it's just a fact. Joseph is one of those people that was accepted in the main group, and he could be in that motherfucker comfortably. People liked him. He's funny, and he relates in a lot of ways, right? But the impression that I got was that he was much more comfortable in the stragglers. And this is the same way that he described it when we were adults, because of course he don't got the vernacular or the understanding to explain it that way when we were children, 7, 8, 9 years old. But when we were adults, it was just a few months ago, he was standing right here behind this camera and he said it himself, like, I always kind of liked being with people like you, even though I knew everybody else. Because with you, I could kind of like let go of that act. I could be myself, or I could sort of, melt into the room and not have to, play up to this group, even though I know how, like I don't want to. Man, life is crazy. And it only gets crazier the longer I live it. I do not understand this shit, but I am observing it, and I'm doing my best to understand the things that I can understand. This shit is crazy, man. This was Streams episode 32, I think. I appreciate you for listening, man. I'll see you next week, my guy. I appreciate you for listening. Salutes with both hands. We're going to double salute with, you know what I'm saying? I appreciate y'all for listening. If you're not subscribed, please do that for me, because I want to grow this channel and I want to stop doing this shit. I want to make money off my motherfucking channel. So the more that you subscribe, the sooner you do that, the sooner I can do that. And I could be a motherfucking millionaire, 100,000-aire off this shit, man. But I appreciate y'all for real, though. I'll see y'all next week. Holla.